A single signature on a piece of paper can destroy a life or buy an empire. Harper stood in the pouring rain outside the glistening Harrington Tower in Manhattan, clutching a cardboard box that held the shattered remains of her dignity. Just 20 minutes earlier, her fiancé had laughed while security escorted her out. The world saw a failure, a useless assistant who couldn't even get the coffee order right. But what none of them knew, not the vicious boss, not the cheating fiancé, and certainly not the tabloids, was that the phone in her pocket was ringing, and on the other line was the executor of the Sterling estate. Harper wasn't just fired, she was about to become their boss. The silence in the boardroom of Harrington and Associates was louder than a scream. Harper knelt on the Persian rug, an antique that reportedly cost more than her father's house, dabbing frantically at the spreading brown stain. The smell of roasted hazelnut coffee filled the air, sickeningly sweet against the cold, sterilized atmosphere of the frantic meeting. "Leave it!" a voice sliced through the room. Harper froze. She looked up, her eyes meeting the cold, dead stare of Victoria Harrington. Victoria wasn't just the VP of marketing. She was a shark in Louboutins, a woman who had made sport of terrorizing the junior staff for decades. "I said leave it," Victoria repeated, turning her gaze to the man sitting at the head of the table. "Honestly, Brody, I don't know why you keep this thing around. She's clumsy, she's plain, and she smells like desperation. It's off-brand for us." Harper's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked toward Brody. Brody, with his perfect jawline and his tailored navy suit. Brody, whom she had been dating for 2 years in secret because the company policy is strict. Brody, who had promised her that once he got the promotion to partner, they would go public. Brody didn't look at her. He was busy checking his reflection in his watch. A Rolex Submariner Harper had saved for 3 years to buy him for his birthday. "You're right, Victoria," Brody said, his voice smooth, devoid of any warmth. He finally glanced at Harper, but there was no love in his eyes, only annoyance. "Harper, you're embarrassing me. Get out." "Brody?" Harper whispered, the wet rag trembling in her hand. "But the presentation, I stayed up all night helping you with the financial projections. You said—" "I said, get out," Brody snapped, standing up. The sudden movement made the other executives jump. "And while you're at it, stop by HR. You're done here, and don't bother coming back to the apartment tonight. I need space to focus on my career, not clean up your messes." The room erupted in low snickers. Tiffany, a junior associate who had been eyeing Brody for months, covered a smirk with her manicured hand. Harper stood up, her knees weak. The useless label hadn't been spoken aloud, but it hung over her head like a neon sign. She was the girl from the wrong side of the tracks, the scholarship kid who barely scraped by, the one they kept around to fetch lunch and take the blame. She didn't cry. Not there. She placed the rag on the table, right next to the coffee stain, and walked out. As the heavy glass doors swung shut behind her, she heard Tiffany's voice drift into the hallway. "God, Brody, you're finally free. She was such a charity case." "Tell me about it," Brody laughed. "Consider the trash taken out. New York City has a way of kicking you when you're down." The moment Harper stepped out of the Harrington Tower onto Fifth Avenue, the sky opened up. It wasn't just rain. It was a deluge. She didn't have an umbrella. She didn't have a job. And apparently she didn't have a boyfriend or an apartment anymore. She huddled under the awning of a closed Tiffany & Company store, clutching her box of belongings, a stapler, a dying succulent, and a framed photo of her mother, who had passed away when Harper was 6. Useless, she muttered to herself, watching the water soak into her cheap Payless flats. That's what they all think. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. "If this is the landlord telling me I'm late on rent, I swear." Harper fished the phone out. It wasn't the landlord. It was a blocked number. "Hello?" she answered, her voice cracking. "Is this Harper Evans?" The voice on the other end was deep, British, and incredibly precise. It sounded like the voice of a man who had never waited in line for anything in his life. "Yes. Who is this? I don't have money for whatever you're selling." "I am not selling anything, Miss Evans. My name is Giles Pembroke. I am the senior legal counsel for the Sterling Trust. I have been trying to locate you for 6 months. Harper frowned, wiping rain from her eyelashes. "Sterling Trust? Like Preston Sterling? The tech tycoon?" Preston Sterling was a myth. He was the billionaire recluse who owned half of Silicon Valley and significant real estate in London and Tokyo. He was the kind of man who appeared in Forbes, but never in photos. "The very same," Giles said. "Mr. Sterling has passed away, Miss Evans, last night at his estate in Zurich." I'm sorry to hear that," Harper said, confused. "But why are you calling me?" There was a pause on the line, a heavy, pregnant pause that seemed to stop the rain itself. "Because, Miss Evans," Giles said softly, "Preston Sterling was your father." Harper laughed. It was a dry, hysterical sound. "Okay, look, this is a sick joke. Brody put you up to this? Is Tiffany listening? Tell them it's not funny." "This is not a joke. Your mother, Maria Evans, worked at the Sterling Manor in the late 90s. There was an arrangement. A non-disclosure agreement. You were kept secret for your own protection, Harper. But Preston never forgot. He watched you, from a distance. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the curb, splashing water onto the sidewalk. The back door opened, and a man in an immaculate grey suit stepped out, holding a massive red umbrella. He held a phone to his ear. "I am standing 5 feet away from you, Miss Evans," the voice on the phone said, matching the lips of the man in front of her. "Please, get in the car. We have a lot of paperwork to sign before the stock market opens in Tokyo." The interior of the Rolls-Royce smelled of aged leather and expensive scotch. Harper sat frozen, water dripping from her hair onto the pristine upholstery. Giles Pembroke sat across from her. He looked exactly as he sounded. Sharp, older, with silver hair combed back severely. He placed a briefcase on his lap and clicked it open. "I don't believe you," Harper said, though her conviction was fading. The car was too real. The umbrella was too expensive. "You don't have to believe me yet," Giles said. He pulled out a thick document and a sleek, black iPad. "But we need to move quickly. When the world finds out Preston Sterling is dead, his company stock will plummet, unless we announce the heir immediately." "Heir?" Harper choked out. "Sole heir," Giles corrected. "Preston had no other children, no wife, just you." He handed her 3 envelopes. They were thick, creamy paper, sealed with red wax. "Your father left instructions. He called it the education. He knew you grew up struggling, Harper. He knew you were humble. He admired that. He didn't want a spoiled brat running his empire. He wanted a survivor." Harper touched the first envelope. It had the number 1 written on it in shaky cursive. "Open it," Giles urged. Harper broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "My dearest Harper, if you are reading this, I am gone. I am sorry I was a ghost in your life. It was the only way to keep you safe from the vultures who surrounded me. But I have seen you. I saw you work 3 jobs to pay for college. I saw you take care of your aunt when she was sick. I saw you at Harrington and Associates, letting those small people make you feel small. It is time to be big, my daughter. Envelope 1 is your liquidity. Giles has transferred $500 million into a private account in your name this morning. Use it to fix your immediate problems. Envelope 2 is your power. It contains the deed to the Sterling controlling interest. Envelope 3. Do not open Envelope 3 until you have dealt with your enemies. It is the nuclear option. Love, Dad." Harper stared at the letter. Her hands shook violently. She looked at Giles. 500 million? "It's a starter fund," Giles said nonchalantly, "for wardrobe, housing, and security. Now, Miss Evans, the driver is taking us to the Mandarin Oriental. We have booked the penthouse. You need a shower, a stylist, and a lawyer. In that order. Wait, Harper said, her eyes narrowing. A strange heat was rising in her chest. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't fear. It was rage. Pure, refined rage at every person who had ever looked down on her. Take me to the bank, she said. Giles raised an eyebrow. The bank? No, Harper corrected herself, looking out the window as they passed the Harrington Tower. She saw the lights on the 40th floor, the boardroom where Brodie and Victoria were likely drinking champagne, celebrating her firing. Take me to the St. Regis, Harper said. The Harrington Group is hosting their annual client gala there tonight. Brodie is receiving an award. Giles smiled. A thin, dangerous curl of his lips. Excellent choice, Miss Sterling. I believe we can arrange for you to be the surprise guest. No, Harper said, clutching the letter. Not a guest. I want to buy the venue. Giles checked his watch. The St. Regis is a historic hotel. It would be difficult to purchase the entire building by 7 p.m. He paused, tapping on his iPad. However, the event space is managed by a subsidiary we acquired last year. I can ensure you have executive privileges over the guest list and the microphones. Good, Harper said, leaning back. And Giles? Yes, ma'am. Get me a dress, a red one, the kind that makes people afraid to talk to you. The penthouse of the Mandarin Oriental was larger than the entire house Harper grew up in. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, a bathroom clad in Italian marble, and a team of 6 people waiting for her when she arrived. Giles Pembroke stood by the door, checking his watch. We have 2 hours until the speeches begin at the St. Regis. The team knows what to do. Harper stood in the center of the room, still dripping wet, clutching the box containing her dead succulent. She felt like an imposter, a fraud. A few hours ago, she was worrying about the price of milk. Now, a woman named Coco, who Giles introduced as the stylist for the royal family of Monaco, was circling her like a hawk eyeing prey. She has good bones, Coco declared, lifting Harper's chin with a manicured finger. But the posture is apologetic. You stand like you are waiting for permission to exist. We must fix that. I don't need to fix my posture, Harper snapped, surprising herself. The anger from the street was still simmering, hot and heavy in her gut. I need to fix a mistake I made for 2 years. I need a dress that says, I could buy your life. Coco smiled, a genuine, terrifying smile. I have just the thing. Archive Alexander McQueen. Crimson silk. Structural. Dangerous. As the team went to work, hair, makeup, nails, Harper stared at herself in the lighted mirror. She watched the useless assistant disappear. The dark circles under her eyes were concealed. Her mousy brown hair was blown out into cascading chestnut waves. Her lips were painted a deep blood red. When she finally stepped into the dress, it fit like armor. It was strapless, with a corset bodice that cinched her waist and a slit that ran up her thigh. She put on the heels, 4-inch stilettos encrusted with crystals. Giles walked in and paused. For the first time, the stoic lawyer looked impressed. He opened a velvet box. Inside lay a necklace, a waterfall of diamonds ending in a ruby the size of a pigeon's egg. The sterling fire, Giles said reverently. Your father bought this for your mother, though he never got the chance to give it to her. It has been in a vault for 25 years. Harper allowed him to clasp the cold metal around her neck. The weight of it settled on her collarbones. It felt like responsibility. It felt like a weapon. Let's go, Harper said. I don't want to be late for Brodie's big moment. The St. Regis ballroom was a sea of black tuxedos and champagne flutes. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. This was the Harrington and Associates' annual gala, the night they patted themselves on the back for another year of corporate raiding and ruthless efficiency. Brodie sat at the head table, basking in the glow of the spotlight. He looked handsome, Harper admitted to herself, in a superficial catalogue way. Beside him sat Victoria, wearing a silver dress that looked like chainmail. She was whispering in his ear, and they were both laughing. Probably about Harper. "And now," the MC announced, his voice booming over the speakers, "for the highlight of our evening. The Young Executive of the Year award goes to a man who exemplifies focus, drive, and ruthlessness, Mr. Brody Miller." Applause thundered. Brody stood up, buttoning his jacket. He jogged up the steps to the stage, flashing his white teeth. He took the microphone. "Thank you," Brody said, his voice smooth. "They say success is a lonely road. But I say it's only lonely if you carry dead weight." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. He was referencing her. He was making a joke about firing his girlfriend on the same day he won an award. "I learned this year that you have to cut the fat," Brody continued, his confidence soaring. "You have to surround yourself with excellence. That's why Harrington is #1. We don't tolerate mediocrity." "Is that so?" The voice was amplified, clear and ringing. It didn't come from the stage. The entire room turned. Standing at the double doors at the back of the ballroom was a vision in red. Harper didn't just walk in, she swept in. The security guards who usually manned the doors were nowhere to be seen. Giles had paid them triple their salary to take a 10-minute coffee break. The silence that fell over the room was instant and suffocating. Brody squinted against the stage lights. "Who is—" Harper walked down the center aisle. The sound of her heels on the marble floor echoed like gunshots. Click, click, click. The crowd parted for her, mesmerized. The dress flowed around her like liquid fire. The ruby at her throat caught the light, sending fractured red beams across the room. "Harper," Tiffany whispered from the front table, dropping her fork. Brody froze on stage. He gripped the podium. "Harper, what the hell are you doing here? Security! Get this trash out of here!" Harper didn't stop until she was right in front of the stage. She looked up at him. For 2 years, she had looked up at him with adoration. Now she looked at him like a biologist examining a bug. "You called security?" Harper asked, her voice calm, yet projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. "I'm afraid they work for the venue owner, and seeing as the Sterling Trust just acquired the debt on this building, technically, they work for me." Victoria stood up, her face turning a blotchy red. "Well, what is this nonsense? You're a secretary. You can't afford the water in this room. Get out before I call the police." Harper turned her gaze to Victoria. "Actually, Victoria, I was never a secretary. I was an executive assistant, and I did your job better than you did. I wrote the Miller report. I finalized the Tokyo merger while you were getting Botox, and I cleaned your coffee stains." Harper reached into her clutch, a diamond-encrusted Judith Lieber bag, and pulled out envelope 1. She didn't open it. She just tapped it against her palm. "Brody," Harper said, turning back to the stage, "you said you don't tolerate mediocrity. I agree. That's why I'm cancelling the Harrington contract." "What contract?" Brody stammered, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "You're crazy. You're having a breakdown." "The Sterling Trust invests $200 million annually into Harrington and Associates," Harper said. The room gasped. This was public knowledge, but the scale of it was the company's lifeblood. "I am invoking Article 4, Section C of the investment agreement. Loss of confidence in leadership." You can't invoke that," Brody laughed nervously. "You're nobody. You're a useless girl from Queens." Giles Pembroke stepped out from the shadows behind Harper. He adjusted his glasses. "Actually, Mr. Miller, she is the sole heiress to the Preston Sterling estate. She is now the majority shareholder of your parent company, which makes her your boss's boss." The color drained from Brody's face so fast he looked like a corpse. The microphone slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a deafening screech of feedback. Harper smiled. It was a cold, beautiful smile. "I'm not here to make a scene, Brody," she lied. "I'm just here to take out the trash." She turned to the crowd, raising her voice. "Enjoy the gala, everyone. The open bar is on me. But I'd suggest Harrington employees update their resumes. The restructuring begins at 9 a.m. tomorrow." She turned on her heel and walked out. The room remained silent for 3 seconds, and then absolute chaos erupted. The morning sun hit the glass facade of Harrington Tower, but inside, the atmosphere was darker than a tomb. Harper sat in the back of the Rolls-Royce as it idled at the curb. She was dressed differently today. The red dress was gone, replaced by a sharp navy blue power suit by Tom Ford, hair pulled back into a severe, sleek ponytail. She looked every inch the CEO she had suddenly become. "Are you ready, Miss Sterling?" Giles asked. "Call me Harper," she said, staring up at the building where she had been fired less than 24 hours ago. "And yes, I'm ready." Her phone had been blowing up all night. Brody had called 47 times. Tiffany had sent a text that was a paragraph of weeping emojis. Victoria had sent a threatening email that Giles had already forwarded to the legal team for harassment. Harper stepped out of the car. The paparazzi were already there. The Cinderella heiress story had leaked, likely thanks to a tip from Giles. Flashbulbs popped, blinding her. "Harper, is it true you bought the building? Harper, are you really Preston Sterling's daughter? Harper, what do you have to say to your ex-fiancé?" She ignored them, flanked by 2 massive bodyguards, and pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby fell silent. The receptionist, a sweet girl named Maya, who used to sneak Harper donuts, covered her mouth. Harper winked at her as she marched towards the elevators. She didn't press the button for the 30th floor, where the general offices were. She pressed the button for the 45th floor, the executive suite. When the elevator doors opened, the chaos was audible. People were shouting. Phones were ringing off the hook. Harper walked straight into the main conference room, the same room where she had scrubbed the carpet yesterday. The stain was still there, faint but visible. The board of directors was already seated. They looked terrified. Brody was there, looking like he hadn't slept. His tie was crooked, his eyes bloodshot. Victoria was pacing, smoking a cigarette indoors, which was strictly illegal. "You can't do this!" Victoria screeched as Harper entered. "This is a hostile takeover. We have bylaws." Harper didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table. Giles placed a stack of files in front of her. "Sit down, Victoria," Harper said quietly. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, but the chairman of the board, an old man named Arthur Penhaligon, cut her off. "Sit down, Victoria, now." Victoria slumped into a chair, glaring daggers. "Here is the reality," Harper began, her voice steady. "My father's trust owns 51% of the voting stock in Harrington's parent company. I have reviewed the financials overnight. You are over-leveraged, your client retention is down 12% year over year, and your HR complaints are through the roof." She slid a file across the table toward Brody. "Brody Miller," she said. "You used company funds to lease a Porsche 911. You charged family vacations to the client development account. And you have 3 separate harassment complaints filed against you by junior staff." Brody stood up, trembling. "Harper, please, we can talk about this. The Porsche, that was for image. You know how it is. I did it for us, for our future. There is no us, Brody. There hasn't been since you made me clean the floor while you checked your watch." Harper looked at the board. "I am dissolving the current executive structure, effective immediately." "You can't just fire everyone," Victoria yelled. "The company will collapse without me. I control the marketing contacts." "Actually," a new voice interrupted from the doorway, "she can, and the company won't collapse. It might actually finally turn a profit." Harper turned. Standing in the doorway was a man she hadn't met. He was younger than the board members, perhaps early 30s, with messy dark hair, intense grey eyes, and a suit that cost more than Harper's new car, but was worn with casual disregard. He was leaning against the doorframe, eating a green apple. "Who are you?" Harper asked, guarding her territory. "Ethan Caldwell," the man said, taking a bite of the apple. "I represent the Vanguard Group. We own the other 49% of the stock. Your father and I—" We tolerated each other, but I've been trying to get rid of these clowns for years." He gestured to Brody and Victoria with the apple. Giles leaned in and whispered to Harper, "Ethan Caldwell, the Wolf of Wall Street's younger brother. Dangerous. Brilliant. He hates nepotism. Be careful." Ethan walked into the room, tossing the apple core into a wastebasket with perfect aim. He stopped in front of Harper. He didn't look at her with fear or adoration. He looked at her with challenge. "So," Ethan said, looking her up and down, "you're the secret daughter, the janitor princess." "Executive assistant," Harper corrected, her eyes narrowing. "Right, look, Miss Sterling, I'm glad you fired them," Ethan said, hooking a thumb at Brody, who was now weeping into his hands. "But running $1 billion portfolio isn't the same as fetching coffee. You have the shares, but I have the operational control. You want to play CEO? Fine. But if you tank my stock value, I will eat you alive." Harper stepped closer to him. She could smell sandalwood and rain on him. He was tall, forcing her to tilt her head back slightly, but she didn't back down. "Mr. Caldwell," Harper said, her voice icy, "my father built this empire. You just manage it. If you think I'm just a janitor princess, you're welcome to bet against me. But I warn you, I have nothing left to lose, and I have a lot of money to burn." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Then a slow, crooked smirk spread across his face. "Okay," he said, "you're on. But first, let's finish the execution." Ethan turned to Brody and Victoria. "Get your things. Security will escort you out. And Brody, if you take so much as a stapler, I'll sue you into oblivion." Brody looked at Harper one last time, his eyes pleading. "Harper, babe, please." Harper looked at the man she thought she loved. She felt nothing, no pain, no regret. Just a clean, empty slate. "Goodbye, Brody," she said. As security dragged a sobbing Brody and a screaming Victoria out of the room, Harper turned back to the window. She had won. She had the company. She had the power. But as she looked at her reflection in the glass, she saw Ethan Caldwell's reflection behind her, watching her like a hawk. "So," Ethan said, sitting in the chairman's chair and putting his feet on the table, "now that the fun part is over, do you actually know how to read a P&L statement? Or do I need to get you a tutor?" Harper turned around, slamming her hand down on the table right next to his feet. "Get your feet off my table, Caldwell, and pull up the files on the Phoenix project. We have work to do." Ethan raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. He slowly lowered his feet. "The Phoenix project? That's high risk. Your father wouldn't touch it." "I'm not my father," Harper said, opening envelope 2, the deed to the Sterling control. "I'm the one cleaning up his messes." But she had forgotten about envelope 3. It was still in her bag, and she had no idea that opening the Phoenix project files would trigger the very danger her father had died trying to prevent. A week had passed since the red dress revolution, as the tabloids were calling it. Harper hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since. The executive suite of Harrington Tower was no longer a place of leisurely lunches and ego-stroking. It was a war room. Pizza boxes were stacked high on the mahogany tables, and the air was thick with the smell of coffee and stress. Harper sat at the head of the table, surrounded by mountains of financial documents. Her eyes burned. She had fired half the senior staff and was currently trying to learn 5 years of corporate strategy in 5 days. Opposite her sat Ethan Caldwell. He hadn't left. He practically lived in the boardroom now, his expensive suits rumpled, a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow dusting his jaw. He was infuriatingly brilliant. He could scan a 50-page contract in minutes and spot the one loophole that would cost them millions. "You're looking at it wrong," Ethan said, not bothering to look up from his laptop. Harper slammed her pen down. "I'm looking at the Q3 projections, Ethan. The numbers don't add up. There's a $60 million hole in the operating budget labeled R&D consultations." "It's slush," Ethan said dismissively. Brody and Victoria skimmed off the top for years. Your dad knew it. I knew it. We let them take crumbs so they wouldn't ask for the whole cake. 60 million isn't crumbs, Harper snapped, and it's all tied to this. She tapped a thick, black binder in the center of the table labeled Project Phoenix. It was the only file Giles hadn't been able to explain. It was heavily redacted. The digital files were encrypted with military-grade security. "Leave Phoenix alone, Harper," Ethan said, his voice dropping an octave. For the first time, the arrogant edge was gone, replaced by something that sounded like genuine warning. Your father buried that project for a reason. It was the one thing we never talked about. It's radioactive. Why? What were they building? They weren't building anything. Phoenix wasn't R&D. It was a containment unit. Ethan finally looked at her, his grey eyes troubled. Before your father became a ghost, he was aggressive. He made enemies, powerful ones. Phoenix was rumor and shadow. Some said it was blackmail material on senators. Others said it was illegal tech. Whatever it was, Preston shut it down 10 years ago and hid the key. If he shut it down, why was $60 million funneled into it last year? Harper countered. Ethan froze. "Show me." She slid the ledger over. He traced the line item with his finger. His nonchalant facade cracked. "That's impossible. I sign off on all major capital expenditures. I never saw this." "Someone forged your signature," Harper said quietly. "Or someone has override access higher than yours." The silence in the room was chilling. If Ethan, the representative of the Vanguard Group, the co-owner, didn't authorize it, and her father was terrified of it, who was feeding the beast? Harper grabbed the physical Phoenix binder. "I'm going to open the digital files. Tonight. I'll hire the best hackers on the dark web if I have to." "Don't be an idiot." Ethan stood up, moving around the table to grab her wrist. His grip was firm, urgent. "If someone is funneling that kind of money in secret, and you start poking around, you're going to get a target on your back. You're playing a game you don't understand." "Then teach me!" Harper wrenched her arm free, her breath catching in her throat at his proximity. He was close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his grey eyes. "Stop treating me like the hired help, Ethan. I own this nightmare now. I need to know what killed my father." Ethan stared at her. The air between them crackled with frustration, exhaustion, and something else, a friction that had been building for a week. "You think Phoenix killed him?" Ethan asked softly. "He died of a heart attack in Zurich the day after he told Giles he was going to liquidate the Harrington asset completely," Harper said. "You tell me, do you believe in coincidences that convenient?" Ethan ran a hand through his messy hair, exhaling slowly. Okay, fine. But no outside hackers. If we do this, we do it in-house. I have a background in cryptography before I sold my soul to finance." They spent the next 6 hours working in tandem. The antagonism faded into a focused, rhythmic partnership. Ethan worked the code. Harper analyzed the patterns in the redacted text. It was 3 a.m. when Ethan finally broke through the first layer of encryption. "Got it," he muttered. "It's a list." On the massive wall monitor, a spreadsheet materialized. It wasn't code. It wasn't tech. It was names, hundreds of them. Politicians, judges, rival CEOs, media moguls. Next to each name was a dollar amount and a date. "Payments," Harper breathed. "My father wasn't being blackmailed. He was paying bribes. Massive ones." "No," Ethan scrolled down, his face pale. "Look at the recipient column. These aren't going to these people. They are being paid on behalf of them, to shell companies offshore." He clicked on a hyperlinked name, Senator Thomas Croft. A video file opened. It was grainy surveillance footage quality. It showed the senator in a very compromising situation in a Las Vegas hotel room. Harper turned away, sickened. "It's a blackmail database. My father wasn't a tech genius. He was a professional extortionist." "He was both," Ethan said grimly. This is how he kept the regulators off his back. This is how he got the zoning permits for the tower. He bought silence. But why was money going in last year? Harper asked, pointing back to the ledger. If Dad shut it down 10 years ago. She grabbed the mouse and scrolled to the bottom of the payment list. The most recent entries weren't blackmail videos. They were payments made by Preston Sterling himself. $5 million, $10 million, $20 million. The recipient was listed only as Subject Zero. Someone turned the tables on him, Ethan whispered. Someone got hold of the Phoenix database 10 years ago and used it against him. They were bleeding him dry. That's why he was so reclusive. He was terrified. Harper felt a tear roll down her cheek. Her powerful, mythic father, a terrified old man paying for his sins. Look at the dates of the payments, Harper said, her voice trembling. The first payment to Subject Zero was 10 years ago, the exact month Harper turned 18. They weren't blackmailing him with the videos, Harper realized with horror. They were blackmailing him with me. He paid them to keep me secret, to keep me safe. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The useless life she had led, the struggles, the poverty. It had all been bought and paid for by her father to protect her from his own creation. We need to find out who Subject Zero is, Ethan said, his voice steely. Whoever it is, they have the master key to this entire operation, and now that Preston is dead, they're going to come for the heir. The overhead lights in the boardroom suddenly flickered and died. The emergency red LEDs pulsed on. The electronic locks on the boardroom doors slammed shut with a heavy hydraulic thud. Harper looked at her phone. No signal. Ethan snapped his laptop shut. He walked over to the reinforced glass window looking out over the city. Far below, the streetlights were on, but the Harrington Tower was dark. It's a localized power cut, Ethan said calmly, though his jaw was tight. Someone just cut the hard line to the building and jammed the cell frequencies. He turned to Harper, and for the first time, she saw genuine fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. They know we opened the file, Ethan said. They're in the building. The silence in the 70-story tower was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic thump-thump of the red emergency strobes. Giles, Harper whispered. Where is Giles? He left at roughly 10 p.m. to file the probate papers in London, Ethan said, moving away from the window. He took off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. Underneath the expensive fabric, his arms were muscular, tense. We're on our own. Security? The night crew. 3 guys in the lobby. If whoever cut the power is professional, they were neutralized 10 minutes ago. Ethan grabbed a heavy crystal decanter from the side table, dumping the scotch onto the carpet. It was a makeshift weapon. Come away from the door, Harper. Harper moved to stand behind him. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, the corporate maneuvering, the snarky comments. That was a game she was learning to play. This was primal. Who is it? She whispered. Brody? Did he hire someone? Brody couldn't organize a 2-car funeral, Ethan scoffed softly. This is professional. This is Subject Zero coming to collect the keys to the kingdom. They heard the elevator chime down the hall. The emergency power was still running the lifts. Heavy footsteps echoed on the marble corridor. Not stealthy. Confident. The boardroom doors rattled. A keycard beeped and the magnetic locks disengaged. The doors swung open. Standing there, illuminated by the pulsing red light, was not a team of masked mercenaries. It was a single elderly man in a perfectly tailored trench coat, leaning heavily on a silver-tipped cane, Arthur Penhaligon, the chairman of the board, the kindly old grandfather figure who had told Victoria to sit down. He smiled sadly. 2 enormous men in tactical gear with sidearms stood behind him, filling the doorway. "Hello, my dear," Arthur said, his voice raspy but strong. "Working late, I see. Very diligent. Your father would have been proud." "Arthur," Harper breathed, stepping out from behind Ethan. What are you doing? The power. Yes, dreadful nuisance, isn't it? Arthur stepped inside, the two guards flanking him. He looked at the large monitor on the wall, which still displayed the Phoenix ledger on battery power. Ah, you found it. I did warn Preston that encryption was getting sloppy these days. The pieces clicked into place in Harper's mind like a terrifying puzzle. Arthur, who had been with the company since before she was born. Arthur, who always seemed to be in the background, smoothing things over and keeping the peace. "It's you," Harper said, her voice gaining strength. "You're Subject Zero. You were blackmailing my father." Arthur sighed, limping over to pull out a chair. He sat down wearily. Blackmail is such an ugly word, Harper. I prefer profit-sharing. Your father built this company on the backs of others. He destroyed lives with that Phoenix data. I simply felt entitled to a pension. You bled him for 10 years, Ethan spat, moving slightly in front of Harper. You sucked $50 million out of R&D last year alone. Why, you're already rich, Arthur. Arthur's benign expression twisted into a sneer. Rich, I am comfortable, Ethan. Preston was a god, and he treated me like an accountant. I helped him build Phoenix. I gathered the dirt, and when he got a conscience and tried to shut it down, I decided it was time for a change in management. He looked at Harper. He loved you very much, you know. It was his only weakness. As soon as I found out about the little maid's daughter in Queens, I knew I owned him. "Did you kill him?" Harper demanded. The rage was back, hotter than before. It burned away the fear. Arthur shrugged. He was going to liquidate the company. He was going to cash out, take the money, and disappear with you. I couldn't allow my revenue stream to dry up. A little adjustment to his heart medication in Zurich. It was painless. An old man dying in his sleep. Tragic. He tapped his cane on the floor. But now we have a problem. You know, and unlike your father, you are young and foolish, and you have this annoying lapdog, he gestured to Ethan, yapping in your ear. What do you want, Arthur? Harper asked. Everything, Arthur said simply. I have the paperwork right here. One of the guards stepped forward and placed a document on the table. You sign over full voting control of the Sterling Trust to me. You resign as CEO. You and Mr. Caldwell will issue a statement that you are overwhelmed and stepping back. In exchange, you get to keep the initial $500 million Giles gave you, and you walk away alive. And if I don't, then my associates here will throw you both off the balcony. It will look like a tragic suicide pact, brought on by the pressure of sudden fame. The press will eat it up. Ethan tensed, ready to spring. You'll never get away with it. I own senators, Ethan, Arthur roared, losing his composure. I own judges. I have the Phoenix files. I can burn half of Washington to the ground. Who is going to stop me? Harper looked at the document. It was her life, her father's legacy, surrendering to the man who murdered him. She looked at Ethan. He was ready to fight 2 armed men with a crystal decanter to protect her. She looked at her purse on the table. Inside was envelope 3, the nuclear option. Do not open envelope 3 until you have dealt with your enemies, her father's letter had said. Okay, Harper said quietly. I'll sign. Harper, no, Ethan growled. Shut up, Ethan, she said coldly. She walked to the table. She picked up a pen. Arthur smiled, a greedy, triumphant look. Smart girl, Harper leaned over the table. But instead of signing the document, she reached for her purse. The guards raised their weapons. Easy, gentlemen, Harper said. I just need my reading glasses. She reached into the bag and pulled out the thick, wax-sealed envelope 3. Arthur frowned. What is that? My inheritance, Harper said. She broke the wax seal. Inside wasn't money. It wasn't a deed. It was a small silver USB drive and a single index card with a phone number and a 6-digit code. Harper looked at the card. It wasn't a lawyer's number. It was a direct line to the Associate Director of the FBI, a man whose name was not in the Phoenix database, Her father hadn't just been paying Arthur off, he had been building a trap. "You were right, Arthur," Harper said, holding up the USB drive. "My father was a blackmailer, but he knew one day you'd kill him, so he spent the last 10 years compiling evidence. Not on senators. On you." Arthur's face went chalk white. "That's a bluff." "This drive," Harper continued, her voice ringing with authority, "contains the unredacted banking records showing every cent you stole. It has audio recordings of your threats. It has the trace on the person who altered his medication in Zurich. He called it Operation Icarus. He was waiting for you to fly too close to the sun." She picked up the boardroom phone. The landlines worked even when the power was cut, a fact Arthur had overlooked. She dialed the number on the card. "Stop her!" Arthur screamed at the guards. Ethan moved in a blur. He smashed the crystal decanter over the head of the first guard as the man raised his weapon. The gun went off, the shot deafening in the enclosed space, shattering the window. Harper didn't flinch. She held the phone to her ear. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, Director Vance's office. This is Harper Sterling," she said, her eyes locked on Arthur, who was now cowering behind his remaining guard. "Code Omega-6 Actual. Execute Icarus." There was a pause on the line. "Understood, Miss Sterling. Teams are already en route to your location. Keep the line open." Below them, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the night air. Not one or two. Dozens. The remaining guard looked out the broken window, saw the cavalry arriving, looked at Arthur, and then holstered his weapon. He put his hands up. He wasn't getting paid enough to fight the FBI. Arthur Penhaligon, the man who owned Washington, slumped into his chair, defeated by a dead man and the daughter he had called useless. Harper hung up the phone. She walked over to Ethan, who was breathing hard, a cut on his forehead bleeding slightly from the scuffle. She reached up and wiped the blood away with her thumb. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaking. "You okay?" she asked. Ethan looked at her with a completely new expression. It was respect. Deep, undeniable respect. And underneath it, burning brighter now, was desire. "Remind me," Ethan whispered, winces as he touched his head, "never to bet against you, Harper Sterling. Consider yourself reminded." She turned to look at Arthur, who was weeping silently as the elevator doors down the hall dinged open, revealing FBI agents in windbreakers pouring into the corridor. The nightmare was over. The janitor had taken out the trash, once and for all. Harper looked out the broken window at the city lights below. It was her city now, and she was just getting started. 6 months later, the New York skyline looked the same, but everything inside the newly christened Sterling Tower had changed. The toxicity was scrubbed from the walls along with the old Harrington logo. The useless assistants were now project managers, and the executives who ruled by fear were gone, replaced by leaders who understood that loyalty had to be earned. Harper stood on the balcony of her office, the office that once belonged to the man who fired her. The summer wind caught the hem of her white silk dress. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. The company's stock was up 40%, largely thanks to the ethical restructuring of the Phoenix assets into a legitimate cybersecurity division. The door opened, and Ethan walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was in jeans and a t-shirt, carrying 2 coffees. He had resigned from the Vanguard Group to become the COO of Sterling. "You're brooding," Ethan said, handing her a cup. "Stop it. We have the charity gala in an hour." Harper smiled, taking the cup. "I'm not brooding. I'm remembering." "Remembering what? The rain? The bad shoes?" Ethan leaned against the railing next to her, his arm brushing hers. The tension from that night in the boardroom had softened into a steady, burning partnership. They were a team in every sense of the word. "I'm remembering that they called me useless," Harper said softly. "And if they hadn't, I never would have found my fire." She looked down at the street below. A young woman was rushing along the sidewalk, dropping a stack of files in a puddle, looking ready to cry. She looked terrified, overwhelmed and alone. Harper turned to her desk phone and dialed the front desk. "Maya, it's Harper. Look out the front window. There's a girl in a grey coat who just dropped her files. Send security down to help her gather them. And then bring her up to my office. I think we have an opening in the internship program." Ethan grinned, wrapping an arm around her waist and pulling her close. "You can't save everyone, Harper." "Maybe not," Harper said, leaning into him, feeling the warmth of the sun and the man she loved. She touched the ruby necklace at her throat, her father's legacy, now fully hers. "But I can try. After all, you never know which useless girl is secretly holding the keys to the kingdom." She finished her coffee, straightened her spine, and turned back to the city. "Ready?" Ethan asked. "Always," Harper replied. And that is how Harper Sterling went from a janitor of broken dreams to the queen of the corporate world. She proved that your current situation is not your final destination. Brody and Victoria saw a useless assistant, but they failed to see the strength, intelligence, and fire hiding just beneath the surface. In the end, the very person they threw out like trash was the one who bought the building. It's a powerful reminder to treat everyone with respect, because you never know who you are actually talking to. The person serving your coffee today might be signing your paycheck tomorrow. If you enjoyed Harper's journey from heartbreak to billionaire boss, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. And if you want more stories about karma, secrets, and sweet revenge, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.